Strange, but true stories. Tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. We haven't had a visit from Bigfoot here on SBT lately. This account comes to us from our email pile from a viewer just like you who wanted to share their story with us. More on how you can share your strange but true story at the end. But here's today's encounter with the big, hairy, smelly beast. First, a brief note from the author of this account. For those who take time to listen to this, please don't judge me. I told this exactly as I remember it. I have not shared it with anyone else because probably no one else would believe me, and also think I'm mentally unstable. Now that some time has passed, I myself sometimes think it never happened. That I imagined the whole thing. Actually, I wish this had never happened to me. But I know it did. The following is based on true events that took place in central Vermont several years back. Don't try and guess the location of this event. I've made some minor changes to kind of throw off some clever detectives who might know the local topography all too well. Now, my friend owns a cozy rustic house on the edge of thousands of acres of Vermont state recreation land. It lies between a handful of neighbors on a dead-end road that connects to a hilly, winding backcountry road somewhere in between the Green Mountains and one of the state's largest lakes. Once the leaves fill out in mid-spring, you can barely see the property through the long, winding driveway. I often visit this beautiful location, sometimes spending the night or just dropping by unannounced to venture into the forest. Well, on this particular day, I knew I would be alone and gone before anyone knew I was there. Sometimes that's the way I like it. Well, this day, some years ago, followed by a nor'easter that formed drifts of light March winter snow several feet high, I packed my phone, which unfortunately I couldn't take pictures with, and I had my pistol and my knife, which I always do when venturing into the deep woods. I fastened my snowshoes on and I headed out for a 2 to 3 hour hike. The sun was out, and soon it would be warm enough to cause the snow on the upper tree branches to melt and fall, littering the ground with millions of potholes, making most tracks unreadable. Heading west, I followed the edge of a wetland that I knew would lead to a small brook that winds from south to north less than a mile in length. I would meet the brook at its most southern point and follow it to the north. The deep snow made the hike much longer than a summer walk. As I made my way to the west, there were a few tracks to notice. Perhaps the light scuffling of a squirrel or a chipmunk off in the distance. The day was bright and sunny. I would be taking off my jacket and gloves before returning to the cabin just before noon. I followed the natural beauty of the winding brook up and down its mounds and small hills, coming to its peak on its west side. The brook began as a stream some 2 or 3 feet across and widened to 10 to 15 feet in places, often making it uncrossable. I loved this brook. I knew only a few hikers and hunters have ever seen it. It's too small to attract attention and well hidden with few entry points to its location. I walked the distance of the brook, coming to an open field to the north where the narrowing stream went underground unseen and unheard. I turned around to follow the brook back to the midpoint and walk back through the woods to my friend's place. It was a decision I would later regret. Halfway down the brook, I turned to the east and was about 50 feet from the noisy, rushing water. There's nothing quite like the solitary beauty of Vermont when you're in your favorite place. But at that moment, I came to a dead stop, not moving and barely breathing. What I heard, I first took to be a bear. A pissed-off bear at that. My stomach, active and unsettled, seemed to make its way to my throat. Adrenaline rushed through my body and my breathing became voluntary. I cannot, giving true justice, describe the deep, dark sound I heard once and then again. I turned slowly, not making noise, to look back to the brook. My thoughts went to the weapons that I had on me. Again, I had my knife. I had an old bayonet from an old army rifle with about an 8-inch blade, and I had my pistol. I unsnapped my holster, lifting my pistol, and opened the cylinder. I reached into my zipped pocket, grasping a shell, and put it into a chamber of my revolver. I carried an any firearm .22 Magnum for my walks in the woods, mostly for rabid animals. I knew it wouldn't do much to a bear, except piss it off more, but it's all I had, and I wanted it fully loaded. I could not see movement, but the loud, deep growls were quickly getting nearer, and I slowly moved to the cover of some small pines with low branches. The wind was in my face as I looked to the west, giving me what I hoped would be another advantage of concealment. And then I saw it. I was low, and I instinctively wanted to flee away from what I saw, but I knew it was too late. If I moved, I would surely be seen. I hoped the distance between me and it was enough. At first I saw its head and again thought it was a bear. But then I realized that this was not a bear. It was walking on 2 legs, standing upright. It was brown, blackish in color, and it was huge. I estimated it to be at least 8 feet tall. On top of that, it wasn't alone. There was a second creature with it, not quite so tall. It followed closely behind and to the side of the first, and it was carrying what looked to be a youngling. They were shaped like humans, but much, much bigger. It was right about then that the smell hit me. I almost gasped aloud involuntarily. It was putrid, like a dead, wet animal surrounded by garbage. At least, I thought, if I could smell it so strongly, maybe it couldn't smell me. The 3 creatures made their way to the brook where the rushing water was exposed and began to drink. Unlike a bear, they didn't put their faces to the water. They used their hands, and they lifted their heads upright, moving from side to side as if to sight danger in the distance. As I took this all in, I thought, that's a friggin' Bigfoot and its family. I tried to calm myself from my overwhelming sense of self-preservation to where I could observe and remember. I began making mental notes: color, size, smell, duly noted, movement, even facial expressions. What a time to forget my binoculars. Now, up to this point, I had not been detected by these creatures, but as I was peering through the pine branches, frozen in fear, the large creature was looking right at me. It kept its gaze directly on me. My heart was pounding out of my chest. Fear gripped me, and I was ready to panic and run for my life. But I knew that would not be a good idea, and my better judgment prevailed. It stood up to its full height, making itself as tall as possible. The second creature, apparently sensing danger too, stood and looked in my direction. I knew she was female as she clutched its young one and slowly backed up behind what had to be the male. Then, its face grimaced in anger, and it let out a blood-curdling roar that I had never heard before or since. I was in a true catch-22. I couldn't stay where I was, but I also could not run. Remember, the snow was deep and powdery, and I would be no match for the long legs of that thing. It took 2 steps towards me, and for a moment, everything went black. As I began to refocus, I could see the creature standing on the other side of the water. The male slowly turned and began walking away from me, followed by the female. Oh, thank God, I said to myself under my breath. They were gone in moments, the male taking one last look in my direction, as its head vanished into the wood. I waited for a few more moments, slowly getting to my feet and rising, not wanting to be tricked by the thing. And finally, I said to myself, let's get out of here. I was still terrified. It might follow me home, and I kept turning my head, looking behind and in all directions. Finally, getting to the steps of the house, I ripped my snowshoes off as fast as I could, made for my friend's hidden key to let myself in, locked the door behind me, and without hesitation went upstairs to a 30-30 and loaded several cartridges into the weapon. I looked out the windows of the second floor, moving from bedroom to bathroom to porch, making sure I was alone. After a few minutes, I made my way downstairs and poured myself a stiff drink. It was Friday, and my friend would be home early, and I would be there to meet him. When my friend did arrive, he smiled and said, "Make yourself at home, buddy." But his smile soon disappeared as he studied my expressions. We sat down in the middle of the downstairs, away from the French doors, and I described everything I had seen to him in vivid detail. After a while, he looked at me smiling, and I knew he did not believe me. So I suggested, let's take some rifles and pistols and go to the stream tomorrow morning. He agreed. The next day took forever to arrive, and at daybreak I woke my friend. He looked at me, and he said that I was crazy, that I really must have seen something the previous day. So we went down for coffee and some breakfast, and we got ready to go. I rushed him as much as possible, waited for him to put on his snowshoes, and we were armed with rifles and pistols and a cell phone. Finally, we made our way into the woods. I kept having to slow down to wait for him. After what seemed like forever, following my trail from the day before, we came to the small group of pine trees I had used for cover. "They were right over there," I said, pointing to the water. He looked at me as I hesitated and led the way to the water. The snow was disturbed near the brook, and the tracks that led to and from the water. We crossed to the other side. "Something big came through here, no doubt. Don't walk over these tracks. You definitely saw something. These don't look like your tracks at all." Well, we followed the tracks for an hour or so before they suddenly just disappeared. None of the tracks were clear, as the afternoon sun melted them to distortion. After searching for another hour or so, we made our way back to the cabin without seeing any other evidence of Bigfoot or his family. Now, this may not sound like the scariest encounter with this creature, but for me, my close encounter was close enough. This has been another strange but true story, sent to us by a viewer just like you. Time to tell us what you think about this account in the comments below. And if you have a strange but true account you'd like to share with us, we'd love to see it. Send your story with as much detail as possible in an email to strangebutTrueStories2@gmail.com. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Big thanks and appreciation to all those who have. And thanks for watching this video. Be well, and we'll see you soon.